How did somebody you know ruin their life in one day? 1. My dad used a dirty needle while doing drugs and got HIV. In 2008 he told us he was living with AIDS because of that one day. We have helped pay for the meds or his bills, because he paid for his meds and didn't have the money, ever since. Last summer he got COVID, and when the doctor was talking to my sister on the phone, she asked what special treatment he would need to have due to having AIDS. His doctor of 20 years said, "What? He doesn't have AIDS." We haven't talked to him since, edit. At the time, he said he had been living with HIV for years and that it developed into AIDS for not treating it. I was 16 and dumb. No, I didn't sit down and interrogate my father for hours to make sure he wasn't lying. How dare I not know, right? He gave permission to the doctor to speak to my sister about his medical treatment. No laws broken. The doctor clarified. It wasn't a 2-minute conversation. He had been seeing my dad as a patient for 20 years and knew his medical history. He was as upset as we were that he lied. After finding out, me and my sister confronted him and he admitted to it all. He never had HIV or AIDS. It was all a lie, too. Tried to kill themselves by jumping off a bridge, survived, but now paralyzed from neck down. 3. More like a day horribly altered my life. I was a teacher and coach. For a field trip the principal could not afford 2 buses. So I had to walk about 10 girls to the field trip location, and back to school, while the one bus was filled with the rest of the junior high students and faculty. About a mile each way. I chose the girls of my team because they would listen to me outdoors, unlike lots of middle school kids. While crossing the street in the crosswalk, with the walk signal in our favor. All the kids went first, and like girls they're clumped together and chatting while walking. I noticed a woman made a left turn into our crosswalk and never saw us as she tried to accelerate to beat an oncoming car. I knew she was going to run right through the girls. I pushed the kids forward, very forcefully. Most of the girls fell onto the pavement in front of other vehicles waiting at their red light. They were badly scraped up, like road rash from me pushing them, but no hospitals or doctors were needed for their scrapes. I don't remember the impact. I remember seeing a Pontiac symbol between the headlights. I came to, and I was in a whole different lane, and facing where I had just come from. I could not get up. They say my body went up the car, and off the driver's side. Tearing the side mirror off the car and breaking her windshield. Horror and sobbing for my student athletes. The girls raised me onto a backboard when the ambulance came, which must have been traumatic. Now, 20 years later, I am still an ambulatory wheelchair user. Can't teach or coach. Can't work at a desk. I have chronic pain. Yes, my life can be really sucky, but I would not change what I did that day. When I get low, emotionally from all my limitations, I remember those girls. I watched them go to college, get married, grow into mothers, and hold impressive jobs in their fields. And when they show a photo on FB of their happy moment, it recharges me to know they are safe, healthy and happy. And it reaffirms my decision to save them from harm. 6. He got drunk, got in his car, drove 90 miles per hour, missed a red light and killed my niece and 3 other people. He's been in prison since 2009 and still has 6 years to go, as he plead out to 4 counts of manslaughter. 7. I distantly know somebody who tried to cross the US-Can border without declaring $10,000 in cash, which led to them searching all his stuff and finding no porn on his computer. He's in jail. 8. Guy I knew in uni was inebriated and decided to try and clear a very tall spiked wrought iron fence. He impaled his balls and did not get to keep them. 9. A friend of my parents was a good family man who loved his family. One day he was playing with his toddler and was playfully tossing her on the bed. She would get back up giggling and he would toss her again. In one of the tosses he threw her a bit too far and she hit a bedpost. She lived but became bed-bound, unable to even talk. Not quite vegetable but close. He went to jail on child abuse. Lost his wife, his job and his little girl would never be the same. The guilt was so much he ended it as soon as he could. 10. A guy in Sydney ate a slug for a dare. Got rat lungworm disease. Went into a coma for 18 months, woke up a vegetable confined to wheelchair and needing 24-hour care. Died about 10 years later. From eating a single slug. 11. A buddy from high school blew through a stop sign and hit a couple of motorcyclists, killing them both. He didn't stop to render aid and fled the scene. He was busted for vehicular manslaughter, and spent 12+ years in prison. He's lucky he can work for his dad, because where he lives now is not kind to felons trying to rehabilitate. 12. Dude several years our junior, on the fringe of the friend group, was spiraling into depression. Decided to end it with a shotgun. Didn't get the angle right. Blew his jaw and face off. Literally. It's not for nothing that I've said ever since, there are worse things than dying. So many activity. Please, if you're considering self-harm, seek help. There are those who care and will listen. 11. A week ago, my little sister slipped on the ice getting out of her car and hit her head. She didn't think much of it when she had a pounding headache later, figuring she just whacked herself good. Her friend told her to just sit down and take it easy until she started slurring her words roughly 10 hours after the fall. They called an ambulance for her, but she was going into cardiac arrest. Turns out she'd stopped taking her blood thinners she was supposed to be on for clotting issues. The headache wasn't the fall, it was the clot in her leg cutting off blood to the brain. At the age of 26, she never recovered and leaves behind a 4-year-old and 2-year-old, 12. In college, my ex's friend was pulled over for speeding. He had drugs and alcohol in his system, and when the cop reached in his truck to grab the keys, he panicked and took off, thinking the cop would let go. The cop did not let go, and was dragged for quite a ways before eventually falling to the ground and hitting his head, resulting in his death. My ex's friend was charged with capital murder and sentenced to 20 years in a Mississippi state prison. 21 years old and ruined his entire life in one night. 13. 3 guys in high school decided to speed on the back roads after practice. Lost control, driver was decapitated, passenger, who was being scouted, had severe brain damage and unable to walk, eat etc. on his own, and the third may have walked away, but for the rest of his life will have to live with the trauma. Great bunch of guys, just heartbreaking. 14. Friend of mine from a wealthy Middle Eastern country/family didn't quite ruin his life but F it up for a while. Was in Canada on a student visa but was working after graduating, and had applied for permanent residency. Got rejected, so he took out every credit card he could find and ran them all up. Because he was leaving the country forever that week. Tells his parents he is coming home and why. Mom makes a few phone calls and turns out the kid had screwed up some paperwork, and it was no problem to get it fixed up and approved. That was 15 years ago and he still lives here, but his credit card debt was more than his annual salary, and his parents, correctly, told him he was an idiot and to pay it himself. He also lost out on a job opportunity the next year because his credit was such a disaster. 15. Kid down the street had his best friend over, and his friend, being a 12 to 13-year-old boy, was being a total dickhead. Kid picks up a shotgun his brother left lying around in the dining room and aimed at friend. Friend taunted him. Kid pulled the trigger and filled his friend's head full of buckshot. 2 families instantly devastated. Kid went to jail. I occasionally see the friend when I go out for a walk. He's a grown-up now, but is intellectually maybe 4 to 5 years old, and will be taken care of by family for the rest of his life. Found an article on it www.kgw.com. Police ID Oregon City boy shot in head. Yes, the friend lived though with a lot of brain damage. 16. Friend's son was with his recently engaged fiancée who had a serious nut allergy. They were driving not far from Bendigo. They stopped off at a cafe to buy sandwiches. The woman running the cafe assured them there were no nuts anywhere near the sandwiches, so they bought them then went on their way. Driving out away from town, she was nibbling on the sandwiches when she struggled to breathe. He stopped the car, got out, figured what was going on, went to the back of the car to get her EpiPen, which he struggled to find, but by the time he did find it she was dead. A couple of weeks after the funeral, he got in his car, drove it back to the stretch of roadside where she died, put his foot down on the accelerator and deliberately aimed his car at a power pole. He'd left his mom a note that read, "For anyone wishing to blame someone for this, I need to make it clear that the contamination turned out to be an accidental tainting of a bread batch." The cafe owner did not know about it, nor did the bakery until this incident. 17. Worked in Seattle Airport and a coworker decided to take his own life by stealing an airplane, fly it in loops around the Pacific Northwest airspace, while being chased by the Air Force until finally going nose down. 18. Childhood friend who relapsed from a drug addiction. He ingested fentanyl. Died all alone in a filthy basement. He had been looking healthier, we reconnected and he was planning his life going forward sober. 19. He had just turned 19. Summer after senior year. Dad owns a very lucrative lumber sales and construction company. He got a brand new truck for graduation, and was going to start his job after summer ended with his dad. Trained to be a foreman, and basically be set for life on a path to retire extremely comfortably by the age of 55, he decided to take a bunch of pills and ran a red light. T-boned a car, killing the driver instantly and crippling the passenger for life. He got off with vehicular manslaughter because his dad forked out big money to get the charges lessened. He served 13 years and got out last year. He just walks around the town now because he can't get work, own a license or vehicle. 20. Middle management type man where I used to work, came into the office every other day. He was known to be a stand-up guy, good family man, even a good boss, as good as it gets when it comes to management at least. He got caught having sex with the new hire. Lost his job, his marriage, and his kids stopped talking to him. That was 2 years ago. Last news I got, he's living in a studio apartment with a mattress on the floor, and already spent half his savings on alcohol, 21. I remember my last year of middle school, and we took a field trip to the high school for band class. I met the band director, and I know from everyone, including my own siblings, how loved he was by everyone. Like probably the most popular teacher in the district. He creeped me out, though, in a way I couldn't explain. I didn't like him. A few weeks later, turns out this guy had also been assaulting girls as far back as when my siblings had him, which was over a decade prior. My siblings are 12 and 15 years older than me. One of the girls was in the same grade as my sister. I'm glad he's gone. But it's wild how someone like that can be so popular, 22. Had a friend from high school who decided to opt out by jumping off the roof at his mom's house. He landed in such a way that he survived, but is now paralyzed from the chest down, as in, can't even breathe for himself and fully reliant on home health aides and his mom, whom he despised and named as the reason he wanted out of life. She was a full-blown heroin addict at this point and was a shit show herself, 23. Grew up with a guy, and he was one of those rare people. Handsome, smart, personable, talented athlete, and a super nice guy. Just an awesome dude. Got stupid, drove drunk, ended up utterly paralyzed from the neck down. Couldn't even breath for himself. Opted to end the life support rather than face a lifetime as a lump of meat. His last words were, "I'm sorry, I really fucked up," 24. Some kid in our senior year of high school pulled the fire alarm every day. He was getting away with it for a while. The school had town officials and the chief of the fire department, and police come in and talk about the dangers. The town would send trucks and be without them if there was another emergency. None of that worked. When they offered a reward, the kid's friends ratted him out. His family had to pay for all those calls. He was expelled from school and didn't graduate, 25. Guy I knew, married and with 2 kids. He'd been adopted as a baby and reconnected with his bio family, including his 10-year sister who he was excited to get to know. She came to visit him planning to spend a few weeks with his family. Her first day there, he tried to assault her. She got away from him, ran to the bathroom and called 911. He lost his job, most of his friends, and, we thought at the time, his wife. She took him back when he got out of prison though, 26. My twin aunts were adopted when my mum grew up in the UK in the 60s. Met their birth family on a trip back there as adults. Then the biological dad decided to come to Australia a few months later and meet the grandkids, my uncles etc. He stayed with one twin who had older boys for a month incident-free. Yet within a few days of starting his stay with the other twin, it became apparent my 4-year-old cousin didn't like him. One afternoon cousin keeps saying he's a mean man. That night my aunt goes to pop my cousin in the bath and he's got 2 handprints on his inner thighs, and genitals just starting to bruise. My aunt rang the police and he was taken away and eventually charged. Deported back to the UK. Who does that after being so lucky to have the twins welcome him into his life? He lost his old family, still with birth mum, and his new family in Australia all in one day. 27. My dad once saw a patient who was a seemingly normal, well-adjusted family man in his early 40s with no major health issues and in good physical shape. He was in town for a business trip and had suddenly gone blind. Come to find out, while out with his colleagues, he had tried coke for the first time in his life. It was cut with something that created a blockage in his optic nerve and now he's blind forever. This caused him to lose his job. He had a wife and kids and was the sole breadwinner, 28. My cousin got back into drugs, after having his life together and doing well for a long time. Apparently he had some underlying schizophrenia they think the drug use brought out. He took a rifle to a store parking lot and shot a guy, ran over his body then had a police standoff. Said he shot the president or some crazy shit like that. Needless to say he ruined his life, took another and destroyed another family in the process, 29. My brother lost a friend to drug-induced schizophrenia a couple of years ago. Hung out with a lot of the wrong people in high school and for a few years after. So many of them in and out of prison, a few dead. One lives down the street from us with his parents still. It's a good week if we don't see the cops there at some point. My brother has thankfully been sober for almost 12 years now, but every once in a while, he gets a call about an old friend who has died or something, 30. My brother's been an addict for almost 20 years. Finally maxed out on parole and moved in with my parents. Then he assaulted my elderly mother. So he's back in jail. He thinks there's government drones looking in the windows at night. Thinks my parents are hiding millions from him. I wish my parents had millions. His new thing is that the county jail has his race as Mexican so they are going to deport him. Way out there but he believes it. Truly sad, 31. A guy in my major in college was like this. I didn't have a class with him until my 3rd year, but from what I heard from others who'd lived in his dorm freshman year, he was just a normal dude. Kind of quiet, kept to himself, but not overly weird with bad vibes or anything. But by the time I had a class with him, he was erratic, loud, unruly, and occasionally very violent. He'd claim there were ghosts trying to attack him, or he'd just babble benignly to them in the middle of an exam or something. Multiple professors had to remove him from the classroom on occasion, but it came to a head when I was standing in the hallway outside our TV studio, and local PD passed me to arrest him. He'd straight up attacked our professor with some kind of sharp object. The cops led him out in handcuffs while he laughed and claimed nothing happened. The professor was exaggerating, yet actively bleeding from the face. His parents withdrew him from the university and committed him to an institution or rehab, don't know which. Rumor was that he was heavy into acid and other hallucinogens. No idea what's happened to him since. 32. I didn't believe my mom. She said she'd kick me out at 18, so I never bothered to get a part-time job to save money. My 18th birthday came around. And I said nope to her when she asked if I'd gotten a job or had living arrangements figured out. The next day, I came home from a friend's place to a laundry basket of clothing at the door. She drove me to a homeless shelter and never let me come back home. 33. A kid I knew growing up and was friends with was 16, and his friend who was 15, lured two other kids to a field who were 13 and 16, cousins, where they shot them and dismembered them over weed. Weren't found for 2 weeks, and only because the one kid showed another kid. Ruined many families and lives that day. This was a shock to our entire community. Neither one of the boys who killed them had prior criminal history, or any sort of issues anyone knew or picked up on. My ex from when I was 17 got in car accident from drunk driving and trying to street race, lost control on a corner and hit a tree. The impact instantly killed him, sending his head halfway through the windshield, and ejected his cousin out of the car who lived. He was missing his pinky at the funeral, and the pictures of the car was gut-wrenching. Fast forward to present time. His uncle was arrested for murder a few years back of a 21-year-old girl. He shot execution style and left in a field. I stayed a summer with them when I was with my ex, and it's crazy to think that I could have been in danger at any given time. 34. A coworker of mine who had a very successful management-level job at a big corporation, paralyzed themselves from the waist down after trying to climb up a rain pipe on a drunken dare. They couldn't work for almost a year, returned in a very junior position, and were basically making minimum wage. Their life savings disappeared in a couple of months despite them being amazing at saving, and last I saw them they were made redundant when COVID hit. No idea what their situation now. 35. I went to high school with a guy who later got a rowing scholarship to a pretty good university. One drunken night he tried to climb a drain pipe and got a serious concussion after falling off. He got kicked off the rowing team. Lost his scholarship and had to drop out and come home to recover. His whole life trajectory changed in an instant. Last I heard he has trouble controlling his anger due to the concussion and got a job as a cop. Not a great combo. 36. Had a friend in college. We were both training to be pilots. His dad owned an insurance company, and gave him the company's credit card to pay for all his flight hours with. He got about 2 years and he finished his first license. $30K, $50K. Got a DUI halfway through his second license, pilot career down the drain. On top of that his father's company will be paying for it. 37. Jim, a kid I went to high school with, gave a bunch of other kids a ride home in his pickup truck. The other kids rode in the bed as he drove each of them home. You can already see where this is going, I think. Anyway, Jim tried to make a light but he came up way short. Traffic on the opposite side already had a green light. Jim's truck hit a car in the middle of the intersection, sending the kids riding in the back flying through the air. 2 of the kids died from their injuries while one of the other ones got helicoptered to the ICU. Making matters worse, the car he hit was driven by Erin, a girl we went to high school with. Like, literally nobody blamed her at all. But she was only 16 and had just started driving. But she never signed up to be involved in a crash where people died. The incident sent her over the edge. She had a nervous breakdown and I never saw her again. Life wasn't easy for Jim after that. The other students in school were merciless to him. He obviously felt horrible about what happened. But self-flagellation was apparently not enough for the other students. Eventually, Jim had to leave the school because his safety was legit in danger. Jim's situation might have been exacerbated by some very forgiving parents of the deceased teens. One of them said words to the effect of, "He's already suffering and he'll suffer even more in the future." I can't bring myself to add to his pain. I don't think the other kids took kindly to the parents just letting it go. But I can't prove that. I have no idea what Erin or Jim are up to these days. But I hope they're both better. 38. Guy from my high school got drunk and stoned and swerved off the road, driving his car into an 8-year-old girl, killing her. She was leaving a pajama party, walking in someone's front yard while holding hands with her mom. The mom lived. The guy got like 5 years house arrest or something, so he's free now, but his reputation and name are forever ruined. Witnesses at the scene said he first tried to run away, and was stopped. Then called his mom and said, "I just ruined my life." 39. Went to college with a dude, went to a party, caught him with something in his hand and offering to bartend so the host could mingle. I asked him what was up. He mentioned really wanting to hook up with a girl in his class, but she was engaged. I told him to let that crap go and go jack off or something instead of making an absolutely beyond stupid decision. Told the girl, she told me I was an ugly fat freshman. True, I was overweight, but I was trying to warn her not be her best buddy, and to leave her alone. She dumped her drink on me and I left the party. He roofied her for like 3 days straight and her several times. He didn't use protection. She got pregnant. Her fiancé called off the marriage, and said that was one of his friends who he had known his whole life, the son of his pastor, and she was just AWKY. She couldn't get an abortion without money/ride and went to her parents. Both evangelicals. One shotgun wedding to her, the guy who assaulted her later, and she gave birth to her son. Her son went to live with the grandparents due to bruises and other abuse. Her husband/er had her checked into Stoner Creek, local psychiatric facility, due to suicidal ideation. She killed herself on the first day out. Her assaulter is now dating her younger sister, despite being nearly 12 years her senior, and everyone at my old church comments about how it was such a shame she couldn't get her shit together and be happy to have a family, but thank goodness her sister has more sense. Younger sister has basically adopted her nephew as her own son. Everyone pretends the R was all the older sister's fault. I don't go to church anymore and the campus police wouldn't believe me, receiving rude comments. I am a woman, thanks. I was a quiet, nerdy 19-year-old at her very first party. Don't worry, the guilt still haunts me to this day, thanks. I only went to the party with him because he could drive and I didn't have a car. Didn't want to walk in heels. I know details because it was on her Facebook and her friends got my Snapchat, and sent me a lot of hate telling me it was all my fault. And our pastor told us she had strayed from God and we had to pray for her. She was always with her friends. I figured they would look out for her. She was older than me and had friends and didn't want to listen to a nerd with bad makeup and a Star Trek dress, okay? I still wish every day I had done better or just stabbed the guy or something, but I was scared. He was a lot bigger than me. I reported it the next morning, but they figured I was jealous of her or him or whatever and was just trying to stir up trouble. 40. Old coworker went to Vegas, felt really good about his odds due to the liquor, and ended up betting his entire life savings on roulette and lost. He ended up losing his house, his wife, kids, and from what I've seen he lives in a tiny apartment and works a minimum wage job. 41. My uncle had a girlfriend who wanted coke. He had this amazing Camaro he had been rebuilding for years. Literally my entire childhood I remember him working on this canary yellow Camaro. His girlfriend wanted coke. He sold this car for $10K to get it for her. Once the money/coke was gone. So was she, but he was addicted. He died alone in his apartment a few years later. He was 52. 42. My stepbrother got married at 18. He was a nice guy, but had a quick temper and drank too much. About 2 years into the marriage he and his wife got into an argument while he was drunk. He hopped on his motorcycle without his helmet and took off. He took out 4 mailboxes on 4x4 posts, suffered a severely broken arm and now has the mental capacity of a 5-year-old. Years later his brother, who was supposed to take care of him, went through his bank account. 43. Had a friend who was a compulsive spender. Buy a $9,000 sports motorcycle. Spend $1,200 getting it customized. Traded in 9 months later for $3,000 towards another new one. Guy could probably have a house and be ahead on mortgage with all of the money he spent on stuff he was stupid about. Well, one day, he must have put his credit card number into a hot singles in your area scam. Woke up and his bank account had been cleaned out. Needed to move back into his parents' house and declare bankruptcy. Also borrowed $1,000 from me that I never saw a cent of before he ghosted me. Sad thing about the situation is, even though I did want the money back, I had no intention of disowning his friendship. 44. I worked for a company that had a very prestigious grad program. Getting in and completing it was a fast track to senior management either in our firm or any other in our industry. We treated them very well and had a social event for the new intake. One of the grads sexually assaulted one of the other grads. She decided not to take it to the police, even though we encouraged her to and offered her all the support she needed to deal with it. Needless to say, he was immediately fired and blackballed from the entire industry. One of the senior managers who recruited the guy took his mistake very personally, and has been following his career closely via LinkedIn. Every time he gets a half-decent job, a discreet phone call is made and he fails his probation. 45. This dude, who was blacklisted from working at a lot of local businesses, threw a chair at the assistant manager. The head manager tried to play it off with HR to save him. It was a buddy of his, but HR didn't listen. He was told to leave the property that day. Usually they have to provide notice before letting people go unless under extreme circumstances, and he was banned from the store for 6 months. He ended up moving because no one would hire him. 46. I didn't know this guy, but my friend was his nurse in hospital. He tried to hang himself with his belt, from a tree branch. The branch snapped. He tried again, the branch snapped. At this point he was severely injured, the doctors were amazed he managed a second attempt. Then in the hospital, he broke out of his restraints and managed to get out a window from the 4th floor. He hit an air con mounted to the wall a few stories down. Still alive. At this point, he'd fucked his back so badly that he was several centimeters shorter than when he'd started, his ribs were basically powder and he'd broken both legs. Oh, and his skull was fractured, so they put him in one of those halo things. Apparently he then started trying to bash his skull in with the halo. All I could think was, Jesus fucking Christ, just let the man go, when he was telling me the story. 47. I was in jail for 19 months, with 3 years mandatory drug testing on probation. Because I was caught with weed and 4 Xanax when I was 18. I was caught at my high school, because a friend I split the other 4 Xanax with snitched me out when he got caught. So they said I was distributing to minors since he was 17. We were both seniors. This infuriates me. 48. I worked for a children's hospital just out of college. Long-term care for children whom were severely debilitated by rare genetic diseases, fetal alcohol syndrome etc. I took care of a 15 to 16-year-old boy who did this. Put a shotgun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. He survived. His parents were super religious and decided his life was worth living. He's a vegetable. He lays in a bed, unable to move. He is unable to breathe on his own and is on a ventilator. He wears diapers and soils himself daily. He needs 24/7 care. I haven't worked there in a long time. I don't know if he is still alive, but for his sake, I hope he isn't. In my opinion, he wanted to die, and his parents kept him alive due to their selfish ambition. I don't know his parents. I don't know what his situation was prior to the incident, but I resent his parents for that. I will never understand. 49. My friend's wife was diagnosed with cancer. The doctors said she had about a 10% chance of surviving. She scheduled her surgery for a month out, and without telling him, took out several credit cards in just her name. She ranked up $100,000 in debt in that month, flying around the world, and doing everything on her bucket list. She had the surgery and chemo after and lived. She was fine. That debt completely fucked up their lives for about 10 years. The husband, my friend, knew she was traveling. He saw the roughly $10,000 added to their joint credit card. He did not know she had taken out credit and was hiding an additional $90,000 in debt. His wife honestly thought she would die, and then the credit cards would close the accounts and the family would owe nothing. Which is not exactly how it works. So luckily that did not happen. Yes, it fucked up a lot of things. He lost his DoD security clearance because of it. People with a lot of debt can be bought. And he took a less paying job as a federal contractor, where I met him. But he honestly does not regret it, and is happy to have his wife and kids all alive. 50. Yep. I have a student who has a fanny pack due to medical diagnoses and she was self-conscious about having to wear it. I bought myself a fanny pack and I wear it most days I am in their classroom. Now, there are several students who wear fanny packs. It makes me smile knowing she feels less self-conscious wearing her fanny pack.